Okay, should we get started? Yeah. Okay, thank you all so much for coming out. This is like an insane turnout, so thank you so much. My name is Kate Fleming. You probably already know that. I know a lot of you. For those of you who don't know me, thank you so much. Oh my God, to show up to a talk for someone you don't have to be there? Wow, thank you, truly, it's amazing. This is my show. It's called August. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about it and about my practice leading up to this show today. We're going to start with a meme because my genius friend Marissa Stratton in the back row had an artist talk yesterday, and she posted this on Instagram and was like, this is how it feels like to give an artist talk. And it's so accurate because there's like so many threads all over the place, and it's hard to sort of distill them into one cohesive talk. So for the purposes of this talk, I've sort of distilled the ideas in the show down to 6 main sort of symbols, motifs, ideas that come up a lot in my work. That I'm going to have them numbered throughout the show, so also like if you're feeling like, whoa, this is like really going on, there's just 6, and then we're going to wrap up, so don't worry. Okay, so we're also going to start sort of from the personal and move kind of to the local, then national, and then global in our sort of themes. So beginning with personal. Growing up, I was obsessed with summer. I still am. And I had this ritual, and my parents are in the front row, so I'm curious to know if they knew about this. But every year, on the night before the first day of school, I would sneak out of the house. I don't know if you know this or not. And I wouldn't do anything nefarious. I would just sneak out to go be outside and say goodbye to summer by myself and breathe in the sort of summer air and listen to the crickets, which I recorded these sounds in my parents' backyard. And a lot of times I would do like one slow, sad scooter ride up and down my parents' dead-end street and be like, goodbye, summer. So this show is my attempt to recreate that summer feeling, not just the feeling of summer itself, but also like the feeling of things coming to an end, not only seasons, but also seasons of life. And yeah, so there we go. There's our summer night sort of vibe. Okay, we'll begin. My hometown, a very weird place, Arlington, Virginia. I'm sure you all know it. It's sort of a non-place. Virginia doesn't really want it. DC also super doesn't want it. It's very in between. Nobody really has like Arlington pride. It's not like cool. I'm like a little embarrassed to even be talking about it right now. But it's the place where I grew up, and it has had a huge influence on me. I still live there. Arlington, Virginia contains 28 7-Elevens. It is 26 square miles. It's not even a town. It's actually a county. It's the smallest county in the United States. And it contains 28 7-Eleven locations. What's really interesting about that is that it's a county of 26 square miles, which means that in theory, everyone in Arlington can walk to a 7-Eleven. So it sort of becomes like, oh, that's my 7-Eleven. A lot of the paintings, I've asked collectors who have bought a few of these, and I ask, why that one? They say, oh, that's my 7-Eleven. Okay, same. This is my 7-Eleven, Arlington is sort of this weird, like, liminal in-between space, which is also what I really like to paint, is these in-between spaces, like parking lots and gas stations, and these spaces that make up sort of like the majority of our existence in a weird kind of way, but we don't really pay attention to them. The reason that I decided to paint all 28 7-Elevens in Arlington was because when I was in high school, my friend Teddy and I, in one night, decided to go to every 7-Eleven in Arlington. Okay, but this was pre-GPS, so we were like, yeah, there's like 15. And so we went to like 15 7-Elevens. So it was only once I started these paintings that I was like, oh shit, there's 28. Like, I already told people that I was gonna do this, and now I have to make 28 paintings. But I actually really enjoyed them, and the closer I looked, the more that I saw. This is a picture, I don't know if you can really see it, but it's Teddy like trying to get into 7-Eleven. This was our last one of the night, and like the doors were locked, of course. It's like, there are only 2 in Arlington that are not 24 hours. This is one of them. Chapter 2, the suburbs, built for the car. So the thing that's really fascinating to me about 7-Eleven is that it is so like of and for and by the car, and so are the suburbs. So 7-Eleven is like a weird place because you can park immediately in front of the building. You can park like right, almost touching the building, which makes for a really interesting, painting setup for me. It also sort of says a lot about the place that we live in the suburbs. I don't know if you guys know about third places. It goes back to Ray Oldenburg, a sociologist, who wrote a book in 1989 called The Great Good Place. And he defined it as first place is work, or is home, second place is work, and then third place is something else, a place for people to gather. So in the suburban American landscape that is defined by cars, we don't really walk around that much. And so we're missing third places. We don't have the piazza or whatever, like in Italy or something like that. But what we do have is parking lots. And as I was sitting in the parking lot making these paintings, because I did make every single one from life on site, there were tons of other people hanging out in the parking lots too. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, ooh, creepy. But no, not creepy. I mean, there's some creepy, but also just people getting off of work and needing some place to go, or sometimes you're just not ready to go home yet, but you don't want to be at work anymore. I'm sure everyone has had that experience. Well, anyone who drives a car has had that experience of just sometimes you just gotta sit in the car and it's kind of your own personal protected sort of space. So I originally was planning to not paint the 7-Elevens in the car. I painted this one. This was the first one. And I brought Tom with me, my partner, who's somewhere there. And because I was not trying to get murdered. And he, sat with me and was very patient and everything. But I was like, man, this is going to be a problem. There's 28 of these. It's really going to be a lot of work to sort of get someone to come with me every time. So maybe I'll try and paint inside the car. And the first painting that I made inside the car was this one in the back corner here. 7-Eleven number 2. And that was kind of a revelation for me, the car as a framing device. There are all these windows and the windshield and the mirrors and all these things, and I could use those as a sort of compositional device. I also was looking at Lee Friedlander, who is a street photographer that Tom introduced me to, and I have a great book that belongs to Tom of Lee Friedlander's work for you to look at afterward. He has this series of photographs of where he photographed the landscape from inside the car, and that was sort of percolating through my mind at the same time. I think a lot about the American landscape. If you know anything about me, you know that I traveled to all 50 states over 2 years with Tom in this van. It did make it, surprisingly. So I'm really interested in documenting the American landscape and the sort of in-between places. This is the first painting that I made inside the car, of the car. This was on our 50 states road trip in Sturgis, South Dakota. And it was sort of an aha moment, oh, okay, this framing device of the car, and got me thinking about things moving forward. Okay, point number 3, the American landscape, and affectionate criticism. So something that I personally really enjoy in artwork is when art can contain humor or absurdity or things like that. So I think the work that I make is both extremely sincere and loving and caring, but then I am totally aware of and relish in the absurdity of painting a loving, caring portrait of a corporate entity that doesn't give a shit about me. They don't care about me at all. I reached out to them a lot of times, and they do not care about me, and why would they? I'm just, a regular consumer. I enjoy documenting the sort of consumerism of America with this sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I love it. It's me. It's my upbringing, but also it kind of sucks. It's both can exist at the same time, which is why I said an affectionate criticism. Chapter 4, concrete, asphalt, long grass. So if you look around, you might notice that in the suburbs, basically every single piece of ground is either concrete, asphalt, or long grass. Pretty much every single piece of ground, which I think is really fascinating because it's something that we never really look at, and we take all those materials for granted. So I worked all 3 of those materials into this show. Concrete comes in with the castings, of the Slurpee and of the scent jars. The asphalt is in all of the paintings. It's also in one of the scent jars. I really wanted to get this sort of hot asphalt scent in here. And then, of course, we have our centerpiece, the grass. In preparing for this, yeah, I do have to water and trim the grass. I did today. In preparing for this show, I did a lot of research about the history of the American lawn, which to me is like so interesting. And I like got really into like books like this. This is like my bedtime reading. And it's really fascinating, actually. It's the lawn, like the parking lot or like the gas station or the 7-Eleven, is something that we completely take for granted as, oh yeah, it's supposed to be there. Like that's part of it. So I wanted to offer up a brief quiz. Does anyone who has not talked to me about this know how many species of lawn grass are native to North America? 1 or 2 is a guess. Any other guesses? Correct answer, 0, absolutely 0. Lawn grass does not grow in North America. We have lots of beautiful prairie grasses. They are yellow and spiky and not nice for walking on. So the question becomes, how did we end up with beautiful lawns like this, which is my parents' backyard, and my dad's beautifully tended lawn in America? And it's kind of an interesting story. Pre-Civil War, there were basically no lawns in America. Everybody had swept dirt yards because lawn grass didn't grow here. After the Civil War, the U.S. Department of Agriculture was established, and they started to sort of do different experiments. It was a very small department, and most of them were golfers, and they were like, you know what? We should get some golf courses up in here. So they ended up partnering with the USGA to create all these hybrids and tests to grow lawn grass in America. And fun fact, the place where all these hybrids were created and all these experiments were done was in Arlington, so where the Pentagon is now. So Arlington, the non-place of Arlington, is also the birthplace of the American lawn. So then moving forward into the 1940s and 50s, the lawn, was a lucrative opportunity. There's a lot of tools and, stuff that goes with lawns. They're kind of expensive, and people who were smart and entrepreneurial were like, hey, we should make everybody have a lawn. And not only that, we should create this association between a good lawn and a good American. And that really sticks and is deep in our culture to this day. You see an unkempt lawn, you're like, ooh, that must be not a good neighbor or whatever. It's it's really deeply woven into sort of the fabric of our culture. And even though now I know that and I've done all this research and we all know monoculture and monocrops are bad and chemicals, it's all bad. I get it, totally. But I still love it, It's kind of the same as the landscape. It's I realize its problems, I can be critical of it, and I still have great affection for it. It's very much like that James Baldwin quote, I love my country, and yet I, reserve the right to criticize it endlessly, or something like that. I can hold both at the same time. Okay, chapter 5, the monobloc. Does anyone know what a monobloc is? Anybody? Anybody? It is the most popular chair, the most popular piece of furniture in the world. This is the monobloc chair. There are certain estimates that over 1 billion of them have been sold. It is the most popular piece of furniture in the world. They exist everywhere, even on the cover of Bad Bunny's new album. And I love painting them. So in 2020, I was traveling to all 50 states with my partner, Tom, in our van. We were in Nevada, pandemic happened, and we had to come home. So we drove all the way across the country, and instead of going straight back to Tom's parents' place in Arlington, we decided to spend a couple weeks out at their sort of farmhouse because we didn't want to spread anything. And of course, I was totally, at loose ends. And the only thing that I sort of could hold on to was painting. And in the yard, there were some lawn chairs that were knocked over, and it just made me laugh. And I thought, oh, that's me, just totally had my world blown back. And I just have always enjoyed documenting or painting chairs and drawing chairs because of the way that they imply the figure. It's like a person without actually having a person. So I've painted a lot of monobloc chairs. That's the monobloc. Oh wait, one more quick fact about the monobloc is that the city of Basel, Switzerland banned monobloc chairs for 9 years because they thought they were such an eyesore. But in 2017, they prevailed and they're back. Don't worry. All right, and our final chapter is chapter 6, sodium lamps. Another question for the audience. Does anyone know the difference? I'm sure Brian Kelly knows the answer, between a high pressure sodium bulb and an LED bulb. If you're a painter like me, the difference is just orange and white. So I love high pressure sodium bulbs. Like, I love that light. It has an extremely low what's called color rendering index. So when you're buying lights for like a studio or like to photograph artwork, you want like a super high color rendering index because the colors look the way that they do in daylight. High pressure sodium bulbs, terrible color rendering index. And that means that all the colors are like distorted and flattened in these really strange ways, and it's so fun to paint. It also is this sort of like warm, cozy light, and I love to paint it. So I brought you one of my, oh, and I forgot to show you, actually, here's the chair painting. You can look at it later. Yes, I really enjoy painting high pressure sodium bulb lights. The interesting thing is that, much like the monobloc chair, high pressure sodium bulbs exist the world over. And they have existed as street lamps in the US since 1933. And just in the last 10 or 15 years, we've been switching over to LEDs. There's a lot of good reasons for that. You know, you can see better, for one, and they are, sodium bulbs contain mercury, and that's like not great and stuff. Environmentally, LEDs are better. Visually, they suck. I just am like so bummed. But what's interesting is that we're like right on the precipice of change here. We're watching our actual entire world's nighttime landscape. The color of it is changing, and we can see it. It's really cool. And what's really interesting to me, at least, is that in a high density area at night, on a cloudy night, where there are a lot of sodium bulbs, the sky looks orange. I'm sure you've seen it and noticed it. And once we switch over to LEDs, that won't happen anymore, which means the actual sky will look different in a few years than it does right now. These are the things that I love documenting, is the things that will be different later, that we'll look back on and say, oh, remember how that was like that? There's a lot of nostalgia baked into this show, obviously. Okay, brief Dune aside. We're not gonna do like the whole Dune plot, don't worry. Okay, for those of you who don't know about Dune, which is like, wow. Basically, a bunch of people move from like a water planet to a desert planet, okay? And on the desert planet, there's like almost no water. But there's a palace, and inside the palace, this is in the book but not in the movie, which was a big bummer to me. There's a room that is called the Iraqi Conservatory, which is a water-filled garden inside of this, desert planet, which, in the context of the book is like all about conspicuous consumption and power and blah, blah, blah. But for me, I was like, oh my God, to create a world inside of another world, especially one where there's life and water. And as a person who's so summer-oriented, I thought, oh, could I create summer inside of winter? And that was pretty much the impetus for this show. In conclusion, this is a zoo habitat. I am the animal. I hope that it works for you the way that it works for me. Something that is truly incredible about being an artist is that sometimes you get to create a feeling in another person, which is so amazing. So I hope that you feel that summer feeling here in this show. And that's all I've got. So thank you very much. Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you brought it up because I meant to talk about it, but I forgot. So those who know me know that I have like a particularly keen sense of smell. I can smell when a person that I know has been in a room. I can like pick up something and know if it, like who was wearing it. Like I really I experience the world like through my nose a lot, which is a kind of torture also. But scent triggers memory in a way that a lot of other senses don't, and so I wanted to bring scent into this space. I'm so glad that it's working for you, Catherine. I just cut the grass this morning, so I was really hopeful that the grass smell would come through a little bit. There were a lot of scents that I wanted to incorporate into the show, but I thought, oh, we can't just have like loose scents, like that's really overwhelming. And so the scent jars came about. Some of them have diminished a little bit over time and I need to replenish them. I don't want to tell you exactly what's in them until you smell them because I don't want to suggest something and I want to see what your reaction is to them. But each one contains a scent that for me is very like transporting to a particular season and a particular season of life. Let me know what you smell. Oh yeah, the sound. This is an hour-and-a-half recording from last August in my parents' backyard. I did a lot of work on sound in preparation for this show, which was like really hard, and it's still not quite exactly where I'd like it to be. But I learned a lot about sort of like creating ambient sound, and I had thought that I wanted to create a recording, you know, in a place where there were no airplanes. And so I made all these recordings out sort of in the country, actually where this painting was made. But the problem was that the sound was too big. It was like there were so many insects that you couldn't hear any individual ones, and it just sounded like a din. So what ended up working best was to make a recording in my parents' yard, like near a bush, so you could hear some individual crickets, although you can't really hear them right now. And then I became sort of resigned to the idea that the airplanes are really part of the experience too. You know, it's like it makes you feel like you're outside, and that's the environment that I grew up in. So yeah, good question, Mom. Oh, good question. Okay, number one, I loved just like, I love working plein air. Like I love being outside, painting outside. So working on site, that was amazing. I don't really like working in the studio as much on paintings. I really enjoy being out there. Even though there are people around and things, I usually would have headphones on. I was just like comfortable listening to Harry Potter, like just like so happy. What I didn't like is like the closed quarters, of course. And in particular, I never usually paint sitting down. I always paint standing because I like to back up. So that was a really difficult adjustment to not only be sitting down, but like the painting is like right up in my face, so I can't really see what's happening. The way I sort of got around that was by like taking a lot of pictures and then looking at it as a thumbnail, so seeing it like super, super small, kind of the same as getting back from it. Yeah, I also didn't, I mean, in August it was like really hot. It was like really hot in the car, but better than in December when it was really cold. So. Good question. That is the largest size that will fit in the car, and I was painting mostly in the van also, which is much bigger. A few of these were made in our smaller sedan car, because some of the parking lots are really small and I couldn't really fit the van in there. But yeah, that was kind of tricky, and that I wanted to make a bigger painting, and so I realized I would have to do it in panels like that because no more than one of those would fit in the space. But then I was like, oh no, how am I gonna like line them up? So I would have them both there, and it was a bit kind of, it was challenging for sure. Yeah, you know, that's a really interesting question. It's almost like, I like that it's not exactly in Arlington. It's like, it'd be too much, I think, if it was like being shown in Arlington. It's like, I think what would be even better is if it were being shown like in China or something, or like, you know, somewhere as different from here as possible, and then you really get the maximum impact of like, you know, this is a different thing. I am very thrilled that it's super cold outside. I specifically asked for a winter time slot because I wanted the sort of juxtaposition there. But yeah, good question. I'm glad it's not in Arlington. I don't know, DC people are probably like, okay, yeah, good question. Or at 7-Eleven. My 7-Eleven go-to snack is the salt and vinegar pistachios. They are so good. Seriously recommend. Salt and vinegar pistachios that come in a little bag, and a dragon fruit vitamin water. That's my snack. Yeah, totally. I mean, I think this is kind of like an infinitely expandable project. even like, I could do you one better. Like, if someone wants to pay for me to do this in Japan, like, yeah, like, let's talk after, you know? That would be the dream, I think, to like see the, you know, I've done a lot of painting and a lot of thinking and a lot of writing about like the sort of unifying aesthetic of America, but I think it'd be really cool to explore like the unifying aesthetic like of the world and globalization in that world, in that way. I haven't done that yet, and that would probably be like the dream next step for this project. Yes, thank you for asking about the paint color. My fellow MoCA residents know there was much strife over the paint color. I wish I had a picture up, but if you see my studio wall, it's just like covered in swatches of different paint colors. I really wanted it to feel like night, of course, but I also wanted to capture that sort of like pollution, light pollution sky. Like at first I thought, okay, black, 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 but you know, you never really get a black sky around here. So this sort of, I settled on this kind of like warm purpley color, which to me, which basically I pulled out of that painting that's right behind Cassie, actually, the sky in that painting. That was like the first sky that I painted that I was like, oh, that's it, that's the color. Which actually I painted after a night of painting with Marissa, color genius over here, because she mixes a lot of red into things, and I realized that's the missing piece. Good question. Yeah, I do love to work like in sets. In a strange way, like the limitation is very freeing. For a while, I was doing this thing where whenever I would make one thing that I liked, I would then make 10. Like no matter what it was, it's like, okay, that was a good idea, but does it have legs, you know? And can you see this idea all the way through? The other thing about working in these sort of like sets is that it's like gives me this kind of freedom to experiment, because it's like, okay, I tried that one was crappy, whatever. There's like 10 more that I'm gonna make. Like this sign painting, like I've never made a painting like that. That was just of something that already existed in 2 dimensions, and I might not have taken that chance if I was, you know, getting into this sort of like every painting needs to be good. It gives me a lot of freedom to work in that way. And I also just like, I love a survey. Like I just love a survey. I don't know, it speaks to me. Good question. That is in fact the exact chair from this painting that I painted. I forgot to mention that. It's a real chair. It came from the Woodruff farmhouse. It was really dirty. I cleaned it up. It does have a really interesting quality about it though. It's like something about that chair I find really compelling. I don't know if it's like the sort of orangey light, or like just that it's, as my mom says, it has a patina. But yeah, I don't know. I would be interested to like make some castings of them though. Thank you. Yeah, I first like, that actually the way this sculpture came about was that I wanted to get, I was trying to create a summer feeling. This was the first thing. I was like, I want to create a summer feeling. That comes from having plants and dirt and things decaying. Oh, what if I grew grass in the gallery? And then I drew a mock-up for this, and I was like, I need something on top. And I was like, chair. Gotta be a chair. Gotta be a chair. Good question. So something I love about night painting is that like you can't really see what's happening with the color, and you're kind of working a little bit on instinct. And sort of like the next day, you're like, oh, look at that painting. It looks so different now. So in terms of lights in the car, I was wearing a headlamp, and I had a bunch of like book lights, you know, like reading clip-on lights. But they were all actually of different color temperatures, which was kind of crazy. Sometimes I was working with the ambient light that was around me too. But yeah, there were a lot of different color temperatures, and there's like a part of me that could get really hung up on that, but I was trying to just kind of like, you know, the great thing about night painting is like it does make me sort of loose, because I can't really totally see what's going on. So it's just sort of an exercise in letting go for a person like me who's like hard to let go. Okay, wow, thank you so much for the thoughtful questions. Thanks for coming.